Rebecca had been putting off cleaning her mother's attic for 6 months. Every time she thought about going up there, something always came up. A meeting at work, groceries to buy, her son's soccer practice. But deep down she knew the real reason. Going through her mother's things meant accepting that she was really gone. It was a Saturday morning in late September when she finally climbed those creaky wooden stairs. The attic smelled like old cardboard and dust, with thin streams of sunlight cutting through the small window. Boxes were stacked everywhere, each one holding pieces of a life that had ended too soon. Her mother had only been 67 when the heart attack took her. 1 minute she was watering her roses, the next she was gone. Rebecca started with the obvious things. Clothes that could go to charity, kitchen items her brother might want, old tax documents that could finally be shredded. The work was mindless, which was exactly what she needed. But then she found a box in the far corner, pushed back behind an old lamp and some Christmas decorations. The box was different from the others. It was wooden, not cardboard, with a small brass latch that had turned green with age. Rebecca had never seen it before. She pulled it out, wiping away years of dust with her sleeve, and sat down on an old trunk to open it. Inside were things that didn't make sense: tubes of dried-out oil paint, brushes with hardened bristles, sketches on yellowed paper showing hands, faces, landscapes. And at the bottom, wrapped in a faded silk scarf, was a leather journal. Rebecca held it carefully. The leather was soft and cracked, water-stained in places. No name on the cover, just the initials EM stamped in gold that had mostly worn away. Her mother's name was Eleanor Mitchell. This was hers. She opened it slowly, afraid the old pages might crumble. The first entry was dated March 15, 1981. Rebecca did the math quickly. Her mother would have been 23. The handwriting was her mother's, but younger somehow, the letters more flowing and carefree. Today I painted until my hands were too stiff to hold the brush. The entry began. Professor Chen says I have something special. He used that exact word. Special. I've never felt special in my entire life, but when I'm painting, I feel like I'm finally speaking a language that makes sense. Like I'm finally telling the truth about something, even if I don't know what that truth is yet. Rebecca read it again. Professor Chen, painting? Her mother had been an accountant's wife who kept a clean house and made pot roast every Sunday. She'd never mentioned painting, never mentioned art school, never mentioned feeling anything like what these words described. She kept reading, unable to stop. Entry after entry described art classes, late nights in a studio, the way light fell across a model's face, the satisfaction of mixing the perfect shade of blue. Her mother wrote about other students, about critiques and techniques and the terrifying joy of creation. Sometimes I look at my hands covered in paint and I think, this is what my hands were made for, not typing or cooking or any of the things my mother says a woman's hands should do. This color, this mess, this magic. Rebecca felt something twist in her chest. She'd worked in accounting for 18 years. She sat in a gray cubicle and entered numbers into spreadsheets and went home tired in a way that had nothing to do with her body and everything to do with her soul, and she'd never once questioned it, because her mother had told her it was a good, stable career. Because her mother had said practical was better than passionate. She turned more pages, reading faster now. The entries grew longer, more detailed. Her mother described staying in the studio until 2 in the morning, watching the sunrise through paint-splattered windows. She wrote about a gallery showing interest in her work, about possibly moving to New York for a special program. Then the entries changed. Michael asked me to coffee after class today. I know I shouldn't have said yes, but I couldn't help it. When he talks about art, it's like he sees right into my head. He understands things I can't even put into words. Rebecca's heart started beating faster. Michael? Her father's name was Robert. The next several weeks of entries were full of Michael. Meeting for coffee turned into long walks. Long walks turned into dinners. Dinners turned into something her mother described with words Rebecca had never imagined her using. Words like alive and consumed and finally awake. When I'm with Michael, I'm not Eleanor Mitchell from Cleveland, the daughter of a bank manager who expects me to marry well and have children and never make waves. I'm just just a woman who paints and feels and wants things she's not supposed to want. Rebecca had to stop reading for a moment. This voice, this passion. It was like reading a stranger's diary. Where was the quiet, careful woman who'd raised her? The one who never raised her voice, never made impulsive decisions, never talked about her own wants. She picked up one of the sketches from the box. It showed a man's profile drawn with quick, confident lines, strong jaw, wavy hair, an expression that was both intense and gentle. At the bottom, in her mother's handwriting, M. April 1981. This was Michael, her mother's art teacher, the man she'd been in love with. Rebecca kept reading, and the journal entries grew more complicated. Her mother wrote about getting accepted to a prestigious program in New York, about Michael encouraging her to go, saying she was talented enough to make it. About her own mother, Rebecca's grandmother, telling her she was throwing away her future on nonsense. Then came the entry from July 1981. I'm pregnant. Just 3 words. Underlined twice. The next page was covered in frantic handwriting, lines crossing over each other. Some words pressed so hard into the paper they'd torn through. Mother found out. She told Michael's supervisor at the university. They fired him. He's leaving for New York anyway, and he asked me to come with him. He said we'd figure it out together. But Mother won't stop crying. She says I've ruined everything. She says I've shamed the family. She says the only way to make this right is to marry Robert. He's been asking me out for months, and he has a good job, and he doesn't know about any of this. She says if I do this now, no one ever has to know. She says this is my only choice. Rebecca felt sick. She knew exactly what came next because she knew how the story ended. Her mother married her father in September 1981. Rebecca was born in March 1982. The math had always been a little odd, but no one talked about it. She turned to the next entry. Dated August 10, 1981. Michael left today. I didn't go. I told him I couldn't. I watched his car drive away, and I felt like I was watching my whole life drive away with him. But what choice do I have? I'm going to be someone's mother. I have to be practical now. I have to be responsible. I can't chase dreams when there's a baby coming. The next entries were shorter, the handwriting less fluid. Her mother described the wedding, the small apartment she and Robert moved into, the way she'd packed up her art supplies and put them away. I haven't painted in 3 weeks. Robert says there's no point in wasting money on supplies when we need to save for the baby. He's right. He's always right about these things. This is my life now. Rebecca found a photograph tucked between 2 pages. Her mother at 23, standing in front of a huge canvas covered in swirls of blue and gold. She was wearing overalls splattered with paint, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and she was smiling. Really smiling in a way Rebecca had never seen in any family photo. She looked so young, so happy. So completely unlike the mother Rebecca had known. The last entries in the journal were from early 1983. By then, Rebecca would have been almost a year old, and her mother was pregnant again with her brother. I saw my old art school friend at the grocery store today. She's moving to Boston to teach. She asked what I've been working on, and I didn't know what to say. What am I working on? Diapers and dinner and trying to remember who I used to be. I got home and cried for an hour. Rebecca just watched me with her big brown eyes, and I felt so guilty. This isn't her fault. None of this is her fault. I chose this. I chose safety. I chose practical. I chose to be the person everyone expected me to be. But sometimes I wonder who would I have become if I'd been brave enough to choose myself. Rebecca closed the journal with shaking hands. She sat in that dusty attic as the sun moved across the floor, and she felt like everything she'd believed about her life was cracking open. Her mother hadn't been happy. Her mother had given up everything. And worse, Rebecca had done exactly the same thing. Rebecca couldn't stop reading the journal. She brought it home from the attic that day and stayed up until 3 in the morning, reading every entry twice, 3 times. She studied the sketches, looked at the photographs she'd found tucked between pages, tried to understand this version of her mother she'd never known. Her husband David found her at the kitchen table Sunday morning, still in yesterday's clothes, the journal open in front of her, eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. You okay? He asked, pouring himself coffee. Did you know my mom went to art school? Rebecca's voice came out rough. David shrugged. Your mom, no way. She was an accountant's wife. Made great pot roast, though. Something about the way he said it, so casual and dismissive, made Rebecca angry. She was a person before she was anyone's wife. Obviously. David looked confused. What's going on? But Rebecca couldn't explain it. Not to him. Not to anyone who hadn't read those entries, who hadn't seen that photograph of her mother covered in paint and smiling like she held the whole world in her hands. The next week at work, was torture. Rebecca sat at her desk entering numbers into spreadsheets just like she had for 18 years, but now she kept thinking about her mother's words. When I'm painting, I feel like I'm finally speaking a language that makes sense. When did Rebecca last feel like that? When had she ever felt like that? She'd wanted to be a photographer once. In high school, she'd saved up for a decent camera and spent hours walking around the city taking pictures of everything. The way morning light hit old buildings, strangers' faces in coffee shops, pigeons taking flight. Her photography teacher said she had an eye for it, that she should consider art school, but her mother had said no. Art school was expensive and impractical. Photography wasn't a real career. Rebecca needed something stable, something guaranteed. So she'd studied accounting instead. Met David in college, got married at 24, had Tyler at 26, got the job at Morrison & Associates, bought the house in the suburbs, safe, practical, responsible, just like her mother. Rebecca felt something like panic rising in her chest. She'd spent 20 years building a life that looked exactly like her mother's, and now she understood that her mother had been miserable, that her mother had been trapped, that all those times her mother had pushed her toward practical choices. She'd been trying to save Rebecca from her own fate, but had somehow created it instead. That night, Rebecca started searching online. She typed in Eleanor Mitchell artist and got nothing. She tried Eleanor Mitchell painter Cleveland 1981 and found only a few obituaries from other women with the same name. Her mother's art had vanished like it never existed, but Michael might not have vanished. Rebecca went back to the journal looking for his last name. She found it in an entry from April 1981. Professor Michael Chen gave the most amazing lecture today about color theory. Michael Chen, artist. Probably in his 60s now, if he was still alive. Rebecca spent 3 hours searching. Michael Chen was a surprisingly common name, but she finally found him. An art professor at a college in Brooklyn. His faculty page showed a man with gray hair and kind eyes, wearing paint-stained clothes in his photo. The resemblance to the sketch in her mother's journal was unmistakable. She stared at his email address for 20 minutes before she had the courage to write to him. Dear Professor Chen, you don't know me, but I believe you knew my mother, Eleanor Mitchell. In 1981, she passed away 6 months ago, and I recently found her journal from that time. I'd like to talk to you about her if you're willing. Sincerely, Rebecca. She hit send before she could change her mind. The next few days were agony. She checked her email constantly. She read more of the journal, piecing together the story of who her mother had been and who she'd had to become. She started looking through old family photos with new eyes, trying to find some hint of that vibrant young woman in the careful, quiet mother she remembered. Then she found her mother's old friend's name mentioned in the journal, Patricia Hollis. They'd been classmates, had stayed friends through Rebecca's early childhood, then drifted apart. Rebecca remembered her vaguely, a tall woman with loud laugh who always wore bright colors. She found Patricia on social media within minutes. Still in Cleveland, still painting according to her profile. She taught art classes to seniors now. Rebecca sent her a message. Hi Patricia, I'm Rebecca Mitchell, Eleanor's daughter. I found my mom's journal from art school and I'd really like to talk to you about her if you have time. The response came within an hour. Oh honey, I'm so sorry about your mom. I'd love to talk. Can you come by my studio tomorrow around 2? Rebecca called in sick to work the next day. The first time she'd taken an unscheduled day off in 5 years. Patricia's studio was in a converted warehouse downtown, and Rebecca could smell the paint before she even walked through the door. The space was huge and bright, with canvases everywhere in various states of completion. And there, in the middle of it all, was Patricia, older, grayer, but still wearing those bright colors. Today it was a purple sweater covered in paint stains. You look just like her, Patricia said, pulling Rebecca into a hug before she could say anything. God, you have her eyes exactly. They sat in Patricia's small kitchen area, drinking tea from mismatched mugs, and Rebecca showed her the journal. Patricia's eyes filled with tears as she flipped through the pages. I haven't seen this handwriting in 40 years, she whispered. We used to write notes to each other during our boring lectures. Tell me about her, Rebecca said. Tell me who she really was. Patricia took a long breath. Your mother was the most talented person in our class. And I'm not just saying that because she was my friend. Everyone knew it. The professors knew it. Even the other students who were jealous knew it. When Eleanor painted, it was like she was channeling something from somewhere else, like the art just poured through her. She got up and went to a filing cabinet in the corner, pulling out an old folder. Inside were photographs, yellowed and faded, showing young people in a studio. There was her mother, younger than Rebecca had ever seen her, laughing as she painted. In another photo, she was serious, focused, creating something on a canvas that was almost as tall as she was. That was her senior project, Patricia said, pointing to one image, a series about hidden identities. Women wearing masks, showing different versions of themselves to the world. It was incredible. She got accepted to that program in New York based on that work. Full scholarship. They never gave full scholarships, so what happened? Rebecca asked, even though she already knew. She got pregnant. Your grandmother found out and lost her mind. Back then it was still a big scandal, you know, and Eleanor's mother was very concerned about what people thought. Patricia's face hardened. She told Michael's supervisor about the relationship. It was completely inappropriate, she said. Never mind that your mom was 23 and Michael was only 28. Never mind that they really loved each other. Did you know him, Michael? Oh yes. Everyone knew Michael. He was this brilliant young teacher. And he and your mom, they just fit. Like two pieces of the same painting. Patricia smiled sadly. He wanted to marry her, you know. Wanted to take her to New York, raise the baby together, make it work. But your grandmother convinced Eleanor it would ruin his career, that she'd be holding him back, that she needed to think about the baby's future. So she married my father instead. Robert was a good man, Patricia said carefully. Stable, kind. But he didn't understand art, didn't understand that part of your mother. And Eleanor, she just shut it off. Packed up all her brushes and paints and pretended that person had never existed. Patricia pulled out more photos. Eleanor's artwork filled the images, painting after painting of stunning work. Bold colors, emotional compositions, pieces that made Rebecca's breath catch even in faded photographs. I tried to stay friends with her, Patricia continued, but it was too hard. Every time I talked about art, I could see her face just close down, like she was protecting herself from something that hurt too much. After a few years, we stopped calling. I always regretted that. Rebecca felt tears running down her face. She never told me any of this. Never even mentioned that she painted. She pushed me into accounting. Said I needed something practical. Patricia's expression changed, became understanding and sad all at once. Oh, honey, she was trying to protect you. She thought if you had a stable career, you'd never have to make the choice she made. She didn't realize she was handing you the same cage she'd been locked in. Those words hit Rebecca like a physical blow. The same cage. She thought about her own camera sitting in her closet untouched for years. She'd bought it 5 years ago, thinking she might take up photography again. But between work and Tyler and keeping the house and being a good wife, there was never time. Just like her mother had never had time. Did she ever try to paint again? Rebecca asked. Once, about 10 years after she got married. She called me, all excited. Said she'd set up a little corner in the basement. But then your brother was born and Robert got promoted and they moved to a bigger house and she never set it up again. I think that was when she really gave up. They talked for 3 more hours. Patricia showed her more photographs, told her stories about art school, about gallery showings and midnight painting sessions, and the dreams they'd all had. She talked about Michael too, how he'd tried to contact Eleanor for years after he left, but Eleanor never responded. He's still in New York, you know, Patricia said, teaching at a college in Brooklyn. Never got married. I always wondered if he was still carrying a torch for your mom. Rebecca felt her phone buzz, an email notification. She pulled out her phone and saw it was from Michael Chen. Her hands shook as she opened it. Dear Rebecca, thank you for writing to me. I've thought about your mother almost every day for 43 years. I would very much like to talk to you. Would you be willing to meet? I can come to Cleveland, or if you're ever in New York, please let me know. I'm so deeply sorry for your loss, Michael. Rebecca stared at the words on the screen. Her mother's lost love, still thinking about her after all these years, still wondering what might have been. She looked up at Patricia. He wants to meet. Patricia squeezed her hand. Then you should meet him. For your mom, and maybe for yourself too. That night, Rebecca went home and pulled her camera out of the closet. She dusted it off, charged the battery, and the next morning before work, she walked around her neighborhood taking pictures. The way frost covered dead grass, A cat sitting in a window, bare tree branches against a gray sky. She was 42 years old, and for the first time in decades, she felt something wake up inside her, something that felt an awful lot like hope. Rebecca started carrying her camera everywhere. To the grocery store, to Tyler's soccer games, even to work. She'd take pictures during her lunch break, walking around the business district, capturing reflections in windows and the tired faces of office workers hurrying past. David noticed but didn't say much, just made comments like, "Still doing that photography thing?" with a tone that suggested it was a phase she'd get over. That tone reminded her so much of how her father used to talk about her, mother's little hobbies, that it made her stomach hurt. She'd been emailing back and forth with Michael for 2 weeks now. Short messages at first, awkward and careful. He told her about his teaching, his own artwork. She told him about finding the journal, about learning who her mother really was. Neither of them mentioned the obvious things yet. The pregnancy, the choice, the life that didn't happen. Then one evening, Michael wrote, "I have something I want to show you, but I think it needs to be in person. Would you be willing to come to New York? I'll pay for everything. I know it's a lot to ask, but I think it's important." Rebecca stared at that message for an hour. She had vacation days saved up. Tyler was 16 now, old enough to handle a weekend without her. David would probably be relieved to have some time alone to watch his football games in peace. But going to New York to meet her mother's lost love felt like crossing some kind of line. Like she was stepping into her mother's story instead of living her own, except maybe they were the same story. Maybe they always had been. She booked the train ticket before she could change her mind. David's reaction was predictable. "You're going to New York to meet some old boyfriend of your mom's? That's weird, Rebecca. He was important to her. I want to understand who she was. She was your mom. That's who she was. Why does the rest matter?" Rebecca looked at her husband, at his comfortable face and predictable opinions, and realized she couldn't explain it to him. He'd never wanted anything beyond what he had. He'd never felt trapped by his own choices because his choices had never felt like traps. The train ride to New York took 12 hours, and Rebecca spent most of it looking at the photographs on her camera. They weren't good, not yet. The composition was off. The lighting was amateur. But there was something there. Some kind of vision trying to push its way through. Michael had suggested they meet at a coffee shop in Brooklyn near his apartment. Rebecca was early, anxious, and ordered tea she didn't drink. Then the door opened, and she recognized him immediately from his faculty photo and from that old sketch in her mother's journal. He was 66 now, his hair completely gray, lines around his eyes, but those eyes were the same, kind and intense all at once. "Rebecca," he said, and his voice cracked a little. "You look so much like her." They sat down, and for a few minutes neither of them knew what to say. Then Michael pulled out his phone and showed her a photograph of a painting. It showed a young woman with dark hair, sitting by a window, light falling across her face, her expression both hopeful and heartbroken. "I painted this in 1982, he said, 6 months after I left Cleveland, after Eleanor told me she wasn't coming. I've painted a lot of things in my life, but this is the only one I've never been able to sell. Never even been able to show in a gallery. It felt too private, too raw." Rebecca felt tears burning in her eyes. "That's her. That's how I remember her. How I've always remembered her." Michael's voice was soft. "I tried to contact her for years. Letters, phone calls. But she never responded. Eventually I accepted that she'd made her choice, that she'd built a different life. But I never stopped wondering what might have happened if things had been different." "She kept your sketch," Rebecca said. "The one she drew of you. It was in the journal. I think she kept it her whole life." Michael closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, they were wet. "I need to show you something else. It's at my apartment just a few blocks away. Would you be willing to come?" Rebecca should have felt nervous about going to a stranger's apartment, but somehow she wasn't. This man had loved her mother, had wanted to build a life with her. He was part of the story she needed to understand. His apartment was exactly what she expected. Paint-splattered floors, canvases everywhere, the smell of turpentine and coffee, and on every wall, paintings. Landscapes, portraits, abstract pieces that seemed to shift and breathe. But in his bedroom, he had a locked closet. "I've never shown this to anyone," Michael said as he unlocked it. "After Eleanor told me she wasn't coming, I contacted her friend Patricia, asked her to save any of Eleanor's work she could get. Some of it was still at the school. Some Patricia had kept. I've been holding on to it for 43 years, hoping that somehow someday Eleanor would want it back. He opened the closet door, and Rebecca gasped. Inside were at least 20 canvases. Her mother's paintings preserved and protected. The colors were still vibrant, the brushstrokes still visible, faces and figures and abstract explosions of color, work that was raw and skilled and absolutely stunning. "Oh my God," Rebecca whispered, moving closer. "These are incredible." "Your mother was one of the most talented artists I've ever taught," Michael said. "And I've taught for 40 years. What she had, that raw ability to translate emotion directly onto canvas. Most artists spend their whole lives trying to achieve that. She had it at 23. Rebecca moved from painting to painting, taking pictures with her camera, trying to capture not just the images, but the feeling of them. Each one felt like discovering another piece of her mother, the real person underneath the quiet accountant's wife. One painting stopped her cold. It showed a woman standing at a crossroads, but both paths led into darkness. The woman's face was turned away, but Rebecca recognized the posture, the shape. It was her mother. And she looked utterly lost. "She painted that a week before she told me she wasn't coming to New York," Michael said quietly. "I think she already knew what choice she was going to make. And I think she knew it was going to cost her everything." Rebecca felt something breaking open inside her chest. Her mother had known. She'd known she was giving up her dreams, her talent, her true self. And she'd done it anyway because that's what people expected. That's what her own mother demanded. That's what was practical and safe and right. And now Rebecca was 42 years old, working in a job she hated, married to a man she didn't really love anymore, having given up photography because it wasn't practical. She'd made every single choice her mother made, just with different details. "I'm doing exactly what she did," Rebecca said, her voice breaking. "I had a camera. I had a teacher who said I was good. And my mom told me to study accounting instead, to be practical, to be safe. And I listened because I trusted her, because I thought she knew best. But she was just trying to save me from her own life, and instead she gave it to me." Michael put a hand on her shoulder. "Eleanor loved you so much. I know that doesn't make it better, but she thought she was protecting you. She didn't realize that protection could be its own kind of cage." Rebecca looked at the paintings, at the evidence of her mother's lost talent, and felt something shift inside her, a decision forming, scary and necessary. "What would you have done?" she asked Michael. "If she had come to New York? How would it have worked?" "Honestly, it would have been hard. We would have been broke, stressed, probably fighting sometimes. Art doesn't pay well, especially at first. But we would have been doing what we loved. We would have been living as our true selves. And I really think we would have been happy." He paused. "I've spent 43 years teaching, painting, living the life I wanted to live. And I've never regretted it, not once. But I've always wondered what my life would have been like with Eleanor in it." Rebecca thought about Tyler, her son. 16 years old and already talking about studying engineering because it was practical, because the money was good. She'd been encouraging him just like her mother had encouraged her, the pattern repeating generation after generation. "Can I ask you something?" Rebecca said. "Do you think it's too late?" "To change your life, I mean. Do you think there's a point where you've made your choices and you just have to live with them?" Michael looked at her for a long moment. "You're 42, right?" She nodded. "I'm 66. I've had students start their art careers in their 50s, their 60s, their 70s. One woman in my class is 83 and just had her first gallery showing." "It's never too late to become who you're meant to be." He smiled sadly. It was too late for Eleanor because she decided it was too late. She gave up. "But that doesn't mean you have to." They spent the rest of the afternoon going through her mother's paintings. Michael told her stories about each one when it was created, what Eleanor had been thinking about. He showed her technique, explained composition, helped her understand not just the art but the artist. "Take pictures of all of them," he said. "Document everything. This is your mother's legacy, and you should have it." As Rebecca photographed each painting, she felt something growing inside her. Not quite courage yet, but something close, a recognition that she had a choice. That she'd always had a choice, even if she hadn't seen it. That evening, Michael took her to a small gallery in Brooklyn, where one of his former students was having an opening. The space was packed with people drinking wine and looking at photographs on the walls. Intimate portraits of everyday life, moments most people would overlook. She started taking pictures 3 years ago, Michael told Rebecca. She was a lawyer before that. 48 years old, successful career, and she just woke up one day and realized she was miserable. So she quit and bought a camera. Now look at her. Rebecca looked at the woman glowing as people praised her work, and felt that feeling inside her grow stronger. On the train ride home, she couldn't stop thinking about her mother's paintings, about the woman her mother could have been if she'd been brave enough to choose herself, about all the art that never got created, because Eleanor Mitchell decided she had to be practical instead of passionate. And she thought about her own camera, the pictures she'd been taking, the part of herself she'd buried for 20 years. She thought about David, about their quiet, comfortable, dead marriage. She thought about Tyler, about to make his own choices about his future. She thought about her job, the gray cubicle, the spreadsheets, the way she felt hollowed out by 5 o'clock every single day. The train rocked through the darkness, carrying her back to her safe, practical life. But now she knew something she hadn't known before. She knew what happened when you chose safety over truth. She'd seen it in her mother's journal, in those desperate entries about losing herself. She'd seen it in Michael's sad eyes when he talked about the life that didn't happen. She'd seen it in those paintings locked in a closet for 43 years. Beautiful and unseen, she'd seen it in her own mirror every single morning for the past 20 years, and she finally understood that she could choose differently. Rebecca came home from New York on a Sunday night. David was watching television, barely looked up when she walked in. Tyler was in his room, probably on his computer. The house was exactly as she'd left it. Clean, comfortable, quiet, dead. She couldn't stop thinking about Michael's apartment, the smell of paint and turpentine, the canvases everywhere, the sense that someone was actually living there instead of just existing. Monday morning, she went to work like always. Sat at her desk, opened her computer, looked at the spreadsheet waiting for her. The numbers blurred in front of her eyes. She thought about her mother, sitting at her own desk for 25 years, entering numbers while her real self slowly died inside her. Rebecca closed her laptop. She walked to her boss's office and knocked on the door. "I need to give my notice," she said. "2 weeks, if that works." "I'm resigning." Her boss, Linda, stared at her. "What, why? Did you get another offer?" "No, I just can't do this anymore." "Do what?" "Your job? Rebecca, you're one of our best accountants. If this is about a raise, it's not about money. It's about the fact that I've spent 18 years doing something I hate, and I can't spend one more day pretending that's okay." Linda looked genuinely confused. "But you're so good at it. Being good at something doesn't mean it's what you should be doing with your life." She turned and walked back to her desk before Linda could respond. Her hands were shaking. She'd just quit her job with no plan, no backup, no safety net. It was the most impractical thing she'd done in 2 decades. It felt terrifying and absolutely right. That evening, she told David. His reaction was worse than she'd expected. "You quit? Are you insane? We have a mortgage. Tyler's going to college in 2 years. We have bills, Rebecca. You can't just quit because you're having some kind of midlife crisis." "It's not a midlife crisis. It's me finally waking up." "Waking up to what? To throwing away 18 years of career? To being irresponsible? This isn't you. You don't make crazy decisions like this." Rebecca felt something snap inside her. "You're right. This isn't me. The me you know is someone I built because I thought that's what I was supposed to be, but it's not who I actually am." "And who are you actually?" David's voice was mocking now. "Some artist? Because you took a few pictures? I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to find out." "Well, good luck figuring it out while you're unemployed." David grabbed his keys. "I'm going out." "This is insane." The door slammed behind him and Rebecca stood in the quiet house feeling oddly calm. Tyler came downstairs a few minutes later. "I heard yelling." "You okay, Mom?" She looked at her son, this almost adult person she'd raised, and decided to tell him the truth. "Can we talk?" They sat at the kitchen table and Rebecca told him everything. About his grandmother's journal, about the art school and the dreams that got abandoned, about Michael and the paintings and the choice her mother made that destroyed her from the inside out. "I never knew Grandma was an artist," Tyler said quietly. "Neither did I. She never told me because talking about it hurt too much. She gave up everything she loved because she thought it was the right thing to do, and she pushed me to be practical because she didn't want me to have to make that choice. But instead I made the same choice anyway, just for different reasons. Is that why you quit your job? Part of it. The other part is that I've been miserable for years and I didn't let myself admit it. I kept telling myself I was being responsible, being an adult, but I was really just being afraid. Tyler was quiet for a moment. Dad wants me to study engineering. I know, but I hate math. I'm good at it, but I hate it. I like writing. I like stories. But Dad says that's not a real career. Rebecca felt her heart break and heal at the same time. Tyler, listen to me. Your grandmother gave up her dreams because people told her she had to. I gave up mine for the same reason. Please, please don't do the same thing. Study what you love. Do what makes you feel alive. Maybe it'll be hard. Maybe you'll struggle sometimes. But that's better than spending 40 years wishing you'd been brave enough to try. Her son's eyes filled with tears. What if I fail? What if you don't? They talked until midnight. About dreams and fear and the difference between being practical and being dead inside. About how success doesn't mean anything if you're miserable. About how her mother's biggest regret wasn't the choices she made, but the life she didn't live. The next few days were chaos. David barely spoke to her, and when he did, it was angry. He called her selfish, irresponsible, crazy. He complained to his friends about her breakdown. He made it very clear that he thought she was destroying their life. But Rebecca kept thinking about something Michael had said. It was too late for Eleanor because she decided it was too late. She wasn't going to decide that. Not anymore. She started researching photography programs, workshops, ways to learn what she should have learned 20 years ago. She took pictures every single day, dozens of them, filling her camera's memory card and then downloading everything to practice editing. She reached out to Patricia again, asking about art communities in Cleveland, places where she could learn and grow. Patricia invited her to a gallery opening on Friday night, and Rebecca went alone because David refused to come. The gallery was small and crowded, showing work from local photographers. Rebecca stood in front of a series of portraits, studying the composition, the lighting, trying to understand how the photographer had captured such emotion in simple moments. First time here? Someone asked. Rebecca turned to find a woman about her age holding a glass of wine, dressed all in black. First time at any gallery in about 20 years, Rebecca admitted. What made you come tonight? I'm trying to figure out who I am. The woman laughed, but not unkindly. Aren't we all? I'm Diane. I teach photography workshops. You take pictures? I'm trying to. I'm not very good yet. Good is relative. Passionate is what matters. You passionate about it? Rebecca thought about the feeling she got when she looked through her viewfinder, the way the world made more sense when she was trying to capture it. Yes, I think I really am. Diane pulled out a business card. I'm starting an intensive workshop next month. 6 weeks meets twice a week. It's for people who are serious about learning. If you're interested, let me know. Rebecca took the card like it was something precious. Thank you. I'll be there. Walking to her car that night, she felt lighter than she had in years, like she was finally moving toward something instead of just away from misery. But the hardest conversation was still waiting. She and David had been married for 18 years. They'd built a life together, raised a son, bought a house, but somewhere along the way they'd stopped actually connecting. They were roommates who shared expenses and occasionally had awkward conversations. When was the last time they'd laughed together? When was the last time they'd really talked about anything that mattered? She tried to remember when it had changed, but realized maybe it had always been this way. They'd gotten married because it seemed like the right time, the right thing to do. He had a good job. She was finishing college. Her mother approved. It was practical, just like everything else in her life had been practical. On Saturday morning, while Tyler was at soccer practice, Rebecca finally said what needed to be said. David, we need to talk about our marriage. He looked up from his coffee, his face already defensive. If this is about your job, it's about us. When was the last time you were happy with me? The question seemed to startle him. What? Really happy? Excited to see me? Interested in what I'm thinking? When? David opened his mouth, then closed it. He looked down at his coffee. I don't know. I don't know either. And I think that's the problem. We've been going through the motions for so long that we forgot we're supposed to actually love each other. I do love you. Do you? Or do you love the idea of being married? The stability of it? The convenience? David was quiet for a long time. Then, quietly, he said, "I don't know the difference anymore." Rebecca felt sad but not surprised. "Neither do I. And I think that means we need to make a change." "You want a divorce?" It wasn't a question. "I think we both want out, but we're too scared to say it. We've been unhappy for years, David, both of us, but we stayed because it was easier than leaving. Because divorce is scary and expensive and feels like failure." "It is failure." "No. Staying in a dead marriage for another 20 years, that's failure. At least if we're honest with each other now, we both have time to find something real." David looked at her, really looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. "When did you get so brave?" "About 2 weeks ago, when I realized I've been living my mother's life instead of my own, when I understood that safe isn't the same as happy, when I finally admitted that this," she gestured between them, "hasn't been real for a very long time." They talked for hours. It was the most honest conversation they'd had in their entire marriage. David admitted he'd been unhappy too, that he'd felt trapped but didn't know how to say it. He'd built a life that looked successful from the outside but felt hollow on the inside. "I don't even know what I like anymore," he said. "I go to work, come home, watch TV, go to bed. When did I stop having actual interests? When we stopped being ourselves and started being what we thought we should be." They decided to separate. Not yet divorced, but separate. David would move into an apartment. They'd share custody of Tyler. They'd figure out the rest as they went. It was terrifying and sad and somehow full of relief. Tyler took it better than expected. "I kind of knew," he said. "You guys haven't been happy in a long time. I just didn't know if you realized it." "How long have you known?" "A couple years, I guess. Maybe longer. You're just polite to each other. Like co-workers, not like parents who love each other." The wisdom of 16-year-olds, Rebecca thought. Her last day at Morrison and Associates was strange. People had already heard she was leaving, and most of them thought she was crazy. A few, though, looked at her with something like envy. One co-worker, Helen, stopped by her desk as she was packing up. "Can I ask you something?" "How did you know?" "That it was time to leave?" "I found my mother's journal," Rebecca said, "and I read about what happens when you spend your whole life being practical instead of being yourself. I didn't want that to be my story, too." Helen nodded slowly. "I have a guitar in my closet. Haven't played it in 15 years. I used to write songs. So why did you stop?" "Same reason everyone stops. Life got busy. Bills had to be paid. Being a musician wasn't practical." Helen smiled sadly. "But sometimes I dream about it. About what might have happened if I'd been brave enough to try." "It's not too late," Rebecca said. "I'm 53. So? My mother gave up at 23 and regretted it for 44 years. At least if you try now, you'll know. And if you don't, you'll spend the next 20 years wondering." Rebecca walked out of that office for the last time with nothing but a box of personal items and a camera. She had no job. Her marriage was ending, and she had no idea what came next. But for the first time in 20 years, she felt alive. 6 months later, Rebecca stood in a small gallery in Cleveland, adjusting the lighting on one of her photographs for the 10th time. Her hands were shaking. "It's perfect," Patricia said from behind her. "Stop fussing. What if nobody comes? What if they come and hate it? What if you just breathe and let whatever happens happen?" Rebecca tried to take that advice. The gallery was small, just a renovated storefront in a neighborhood that was trying to come back to life. The walls were painted white, the floors were polished concrete, and hanging on those walls were 32 photographs she'd taken over the past 6 months. She'd called the exhibition Hidden Lives. Each photo showed ordinary moments that revealed something deeper. An old woman's hands, weathered and paint-stained, resting on a kitchen table, a closed door with light streaming underneath. A child's drawing taped to a refrigerator, showing a family that looked nothing like the child's actual family. A man standing at a window, his reflection showing a different expression than his actual face. And in the center of the gallery, in a place of honor, was a photograph of her mother's journal open to that first entry. "Today I painted until my hands were too stiff to hold the brush." Next to it hung a photograph of one of her mother's paintings, the one showing the woman at the crossroads. Rebecca had titled it The Choice She Made. "People are starting to arrive," Diane called out. She'd helped Rebecca organize everything, had even helped her apply for a small grant that paid for the gallery rental. Rebecca's stomach flipped. This was real. This was actually happening. Tyler came in first, looking uncomfortable in a button-up shirt. "Mom, this is really cool. You don't have to sound so surprised." "I'm not surprised. I just didn't know you were this good." He walked over to a photo of an old diner at dawn, empty tables and morning light. "This one's my favorite. It makes me feel something. That's all I could ask for." Her brother Daniel showed up next, looking confused and curious. They'd talked more in the past 6 months than they had in the past 6 years. She'd shown him their mother's journal, and he'd cried. He'd admitted that he'd also felt pressure to be practical, that he'd studied business because it's what their parents wanted, but he'd always wanted to teach. "I put in my application to go back to school," he told her now, "for a teaching certificate. I'm 40 years old and I'm finally going to do what I want to do." Mom would be proud. The real mom, I mean. The one from the journal. I think she'd be proud of both of us. People started filtering in. Some were from Diane's photography network. Some were Patricia's artist friends. Some were just people who'd seen the flyer in a coffee shop window. They moved slowly through the space, studying each photograph, reading the small descriptions Rebecca had written. She heard fragments of conversation. "Look at the emotion in this one. The composition is really strong. I love how she captures ordinary moments and makes them mean something." Then the door opened, and Michael walked in. Rebecca hadn't been sure he'd come. She'd emailed him about the exhibition, sent him the address, but New York to Cleveland was a long trip for what might be a terrible show by an amateur photographer. But here he was, older and grayer but with those same kind eyes, looking around the gallery with an expression she couldn't quite read. He walked slowly through the exhibition, spending time with each photograph. When he got to the center, to the photo of her mother's journal and painting, he stopped for a long time. Rebecca saw him wipe his eyes. Finally, he turned and found her. "Rebecca, this is extraordinary. You don't have to be nice just because I'm not being nice. I'm being honest. You have a real gift. These photographs tell stories. They make people feel things. That's what art is supposed to do." Coming from someone who'd taught art for 40 years, who'd known truly talented people, that meant everything. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for inviting me. And thank you for this." He gestured to the photo of Eleanor's journal. "For letting other people see her work, her words. For making sure she's not forgotten. She shouldn't be forgotten. What she created, who she really was, it mattered. It did. And what you're creating matters too. You know that, right? You're not just doing this for her. You're doing this for yourself." Rebecca nodded. "It took me a while to understand that. I thought I was trying to live the life she didn't get to live. But really, I'm just finally living my own life. The one I should have been living all along." More people arrived. A reporter from a local arts magazine who'd heard about the exhibition and wanted to do a story. A gallery owner from downtown who gave Rebecca her card. A woman who bought 2 prints on the spot. David showed up toward the end, which surprised her. They'd been separated for 5 months now. Were in the process of making it official. Their conversations were still sometimes awkward, but they were learning to be friendly. "Hey," he said, looking around. "This is really impressive, yet you sound surprised. Maybe a little, but in a good way." He stopped in front of a photo of hands holding an old photograph. "I've been thinking a lot about what you said. About how we stopped being ourselves.